Yeah, welcome in. Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got a pretty interesting show for you here today. Going to talk Micah Parsons, and he's mad again, and I don't know why. But before we get to that, you're here on YouTube. You already know what time it is. Please go ahead, click that subscribe, that like, and that notification bell. Make sure you're made aware anytime new content pops up on the channel so you can stay with us on that. If you want the audio-only version of the podcast, make sure you go ahead, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast, and we should come right up. Please don't forget to give us that like, that subscribe, give us that 5-star review, and leave us a comment. All that stuff helps us to find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. We are almost there. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers. I can't wait for that because you know what happens when we get there. We're going to go ahead and start doing these live call-in shows, and you guys are really going to have your chance to interact with me even further, and that's just going to be awesome. Take the show to the next level for 2024. So, let's get right to it. All right, guys, you've heard me talk about Dak Prescott. You've heard me talk about Micah Parsons. You've heard me talk about the fact that I believe these guys don't understand that even though they're outstanding football players, a huge part of their notoriety comes from the fact that they have the star on their helmets, and that star being one of the most recognizable sports brands on the globe. It's probably the Dallas Cowboys star. It's probably the New York Yankees NY, and it's Manchester United English Premier League, right? Those are probably the three most recognizable sports brands on this entire globe. And when you play for those teams and when you're a big time player for those teams, it really helps a lot in terms of your individual visibility as a player. And it helps a lot in terms of your brand. It gets you things you might not have gotten otherwise, and it magnifies your achievements and accomplishments on the pitch, on the field, and on the football field, right? So it frustrates me to no end when you see these guys and they get all that and they love all the adoration that comes with all that, but then when they don't perform up to snuff and people get on them, they have the nerve to get upset because they only want it one way, but they don't understand that that's not how it works, right? I mentioned this on a previous episode, talk about Micah Parsons. In life, every coin has two sides, right? Two sides, right? Heads and tails. And so you can't just have everything that's on heads because sometimes it's going to land tails and you have to learn to deal with that. But Micah Parsons, he's still a young guy, but he doesn't want to seem to deal with that, and he doesn't seem to understand that. So much of the attention that he gets, and don't get me wrong, he is an outstanding player. The guy has 40 and a half sacks in his first 3 years. That's incredible. Now, does that mean that he's what they say he is? Absolutely not. And what do I mean when I say what they say he is? You hear these nonsensical Lawrence Taylor comparisons. You hear this, he has the ability to be the greatest defensive player of all time, all this nonsense. No, he's an extremely talented pass rusher. He's an extremely talented pass rusher, and all these extremely talented pass rushers today are just that. But if we're real, their numbers are also inflated. We talk about this all the time. We talk about it in basketball. The scorers' numbers are inflated. Why? Because they're shooting so many more threes and because the pace of the game is higher. We talk about it in football. If you're a pass rusher, your numbers are going to be through the roof because quarterbacks and offenses are throwing the ball way more than they've ever thrown it in the history of the league. If you are a wide receiver or a quarterback, your numbers are inflated for the same thing I just said. They're throwing the ball more than they've ever thrown it in the history of the league. They're throwing more short passes and more passes to the flat. That's boosting completion percentages. They're not going down the field the same way. Also, the rules are changed. You can't touch guys. You can't really hit quarterbacks. You can't really hit receivers anymore the way you used to. So all these things inflate the numbers. Now, I'm not mad at guys for taking advantage of that. They couldn't help when they were born. They play these games. They play them under the rules that are the rules of the sports now. And so what they get is what they get. With that said, to compare Micah Parsons to Lawrence Taylor is absolutely asinine. And so why am I going into this Micah Parsons Dallas Cowboys thing again? Because unless you were under a rock last week, you saw the Dallas Cowboys get eviscerated, annihilated, destroyed, and dominated on their own field by the Green Bay Packers with a first-year starter and one of the worst defenses in the league. A first-year starter at quarterback, Jordan Love. Now, don't get me wrong. Over the last 6 to 7 games, Jordan Love has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, also, what's my guy's name? CJ Stroud down there in Houston. And so I say all this to say the Cowboys, they had opportunity, if they had played well and depending on how some other things shook out, to maybe host playoff games all the way through the Super Bowl. Now, all that said, the Cowboys laid an egg. With 6 minutes left in the game, the score was 48-16. Now the Cowboys got a couple garbage time touchdowns. Dak Prescott threw for some garbage time yards. All that stuff adds up, makes it look a lot more reasonable than it really was. But they got blown out. Like I said, eviscerated, dominated, annihilated, all on their home field at AT&T Stadium. Cool. Now, Micah Parsons had the nerve to get upset after the game. Why did he get upset? Skip Bayless, we know, is arguably the biggest, if not the biggest, Dallas Cowboys cheerleader in sports media. He has no compunction in telling you how much he's loved the Cowboys since he was a little kid. And he was tweeting through the game as he always does. And obviously he was just disgusted by what he saw. And after the game, this is funny because this is something I was talking to one of my homeboys and I said the exact same thing. After the game, Skip Bayless tweeted, "Can't wait for Micah Parsons' podcast tomorrow. That's what he does best." And it's funny, as I mentioned, I was talking to one of my boys and I was saying, man, I cannot wait to see what Micah Parsons is going to have to say on his podcast. I think it's called The Edge with Micah Parsons. And on a previous episode, quick side note, I talked about this. The fact is, again, while Micah Parsons is an extremely athletic, extremely talented pass rusher for the modern era, it's frustrating. He has this podcast and he talks a lot and he complains, and that's his right. He can say what he wants to say on his show. But it's wild to me because if he wasn't a Dallas Cowboy player, Bleacher Report wouldn't have picked up his podcast so quickly. That's the crazy part. But they know the Dallas Cowboys have a huge backing. They have a huge fan following. So what? It's a smart move to pick up that podcast. I get it. Now, that said, I was looking forward to seeing his podcast the following day. I think it usually airs on a Monday after the game. And I couldn't wait because I wanted to hear what he was going to have to say. I wanted to hear what excuses he was going to have to make. I wanted to hear how he was upset because people are getting on Dak Prescott. Well, Dak Prescott played like crap in the biggest moments, as usual. Nothing new there. Now, if you're looking for Micah Parsons' podcast, and I just checked before I came on here to record this show, he hasn't recorded one since the season ended. Very interesting. Where are you, Micah? You got nothing to say now? You got nothing to complain about? But I guess you do. Because when Skip tweeted, "Can't wait for Micah Parsons' podcast tomorrow," and check this out, I'm putting it up on the screen, and pardon the language, Micah Parsons said, he responded by quote tweeting, "You just a hating ass mofo who mad I ain't want to do your show. Where was all this when you were on my nuts wanting me to come on your show every Tuesday? You lame ASF, Skip. Real ish. Fake ass Cowboy fan." Now, the thing about Micah Parsons, and this is bothersome to me, Micah Parsons, you're a grown man. You are a grown man, but you got a lot of emotional energy. And I really don't understand that. Now, there's a difference between playing with passion. Ray Lewis, the great Ray Lewis, in my opinion, the greatest linebacker who played all time. Now, I could be, I'm sure I'm biased because I'm a Ravens fan, but the way Ray Lewis played, I do believe he's the greatest linebacker ever in terms of just all-around skill set. But anyway, that's a different argument. The point I'm trying to make is he played with passion. Passion, you saw it. He played with passion. He practiced with passion. He led his team with passion. And he still lives to this day with passion, even though he's no longer a player. But with that said, he didn't play emotional. Micah Parsons is emotional. When things don't go his way, he gets whiny and he complains. And you can tell that by that tweet that I just showed you guys. He's emotional. And for a grown man, that's odd behavior, being emotional and not passionate. Playing the game of football with passion, I get it. But emotional, nah, don't agree with that. And so, now, to his defense, because again, I mentioned earlier, right? Every coin got two sides. Earlier in the season, Skip was trying to get Micah Parsons on, and he wanted to do a segment with him every Tuesday after the games, right? But that never worked out. I think the very first time, and maybe this was either Skip's rookie year or last year, but the very first time he was supposed to come on, I think the Cowboys got smoked that Sunday, and Micah Parsons didn't say anything. He just never showed up on the show. So that is what that is. But Skip, obviously, he wanted a big name Cowboys player to come on the show because he's a Cowboys guy. The show is very much geared, the show being undisputed, very much geared towards Cowboy topics and Cowboy fans. So it would have been a smart move to have a Cowboy guy on there to really continue to push those ratings among that fan base. Now, he's got that with retired Hall of Famer Michael Irvin now, but it's kind of not the same as in having an active all-pro Cowboy player. But anyway, I mean, what are you so mad about, Micah Parsons? Okay, I get it. You're upset because your team lost. But guess what? Here comes the question now. What did you, Micah Parsons, do to help your team win? And I asked that for a reason. Now, you can go look this up. Micah Parsons is a guy, as I mentioned, 40 and a half sacks in his first 3 regular seasons in the league. That's great. He's been in the playoffs 3 times, all 3 seasons in the league, and he's played 4 games. You know how many sacks he's had? And the reason I mention sacks, because obviously that's the #1 counting stat for a pass rusher. Okay. Micah Parsons has had 1 sack in 4 playoff games. We look at this guy and we think, oh, he's a game record. He's this, he's that. No, he's really not. He's really not. He's had 1 sack in the playoffs. So the question is, why is this a guy that does not show up? He doesn't show up when the lights are brightest and the games are biggest. And the crazy part is that's not even just the playoffs. That's also in the regular season. This season, I think, was the 3rd year in a row the Cowboys won 13 games. I know it was the 3rd year in a row they won 12 games. But the point is here, in their biggest games against the best competition, where was Micah Parsons with the sacks? So I'm gonna run you down, and I'll actually show it right here on the screen. Their 7 toughest games this year against Green Bay, Detroit, Miami, Buffalo, 2 games against Philadelphia, and 1 game against San Francisco. Total sacks, they have, Michael Parsons has 2.5, 3 sacks. 3 sacks in their 7 toughest games. Now, I don't expect you to have 3 sacks every game, but in your toughest games, that's where the best players show up. And Michael Parsons simply does not do that. It's like he disappears completely. Where is he? I don't understand it. And the other problem is, and this could be part of the scheme and the way they utilize him defensively. If Michael Parsons is not getting sacks or hitting the quarterback, he's pretty much useless. He's not a guy that's good in run coverage. He's not a guy that's particularly good in pass coverage. Now, I get it. He is a pass rusher extraordinaire. But again, the comparison is Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor did it all. My guy, Ray Lewis, he wasn't a pass rusher that Michael Parsons is. I get it. But if you look at Ray Lewis' numbers across the board, forced fumbles, interceptions, he's got some sacks. Not nearly as much as Michael Parsons. I think Ray Lewis has less than 50 sacks in his career, and that's like over 15 years. But that wasn't the role that he was expected to play. But he was a tackling machine. He could stop the run. He could play in pass coverage. He could do it all, right? Michael Parsons, you can't say that. Now, again, in his defense, Michael Parsons, you've only been in the league 3 seasons, so you have time for your game to continue to develop, but you're not a sideline to sideline guy. You're not a guy who's particularly adept at dropping into coverage. You are a guy that's pin your ears back, go get the quarterback. And in situations now where the game gets away from you because the offense isn't doing its thing, you become useless. So you're an all-pro, you're top 10 in sacks. I think you're number 8 in sacks in the NFL this season, but you can only be used and really be effective in specific circumstances. So how great are you if your effectiveness is limited by circumstance? I really don't understand it. And then you have the nerve to get upset when you're critiqued for not doing things the way you should be doing them for a player of your caliber and a player of your who has received the awards you've received in your short time in the league. Doesn't make sense to me. All right, what I want to know from you, do you think Micah Parsons has a right to be upset with Skip? Do you think Micah Parsons has a right to be upset with anybody who criticizes him and the way him and his team plays? Do you think he should just shut up and continue to play and continue to improve? Leave your comments in the comment section. Can't wait to get back with you. Can't wait to hear your comments so I can respond to them. And I'll be back with you on the next episode. And make sure you like, subscribe, and share the show. And I'm out. Peace.